Hi, everyone. Welcome to Brooks River in Katmai National Park, Alaska. This is one of the best places in the world to watch brown bears fishing for salmon. My name is Mike Fitz with explore.org, the world's largest live nature cam network. And I'm joined right now by Katmai National Park Rangers Felicia Jimenez and Naomi Boak. Rangers, great to have you along this evening. We certainly have a lot to talk about.
Yes, we do. I'm happy we can join you.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
And normally we don't do any broadcasts on a Friday evening. It's July 28th. It's about 6 p.m. Eastern time, 2 p.m. in Alaska. And we're going to talk today. We have this special broadcast because of something that happened yesterday. Most of the bears that we see at Brooks River are known individuals, and they've used the river in previous years. In fact, all of the bears that you're seeing from this live clip of the waterfall have been seen in years past. Through the webcams, when we watch these individual bears, we get to witness their stories of resilience and toughness. We watch how they overcome pain and injury, how they face and deal with competition, how they grow and learn through experience. We get to see their moments of joy as well, such as the fun they have during a play fight. And sometimes, we can even sense the satisfaction that they must feel when they have a belly full of salmon. However, the webcams are live, they're unedited, which means we also see bears face hardship, hunger, and sometimes death. And yesterday, late Alaska time, I think around 10:15 p.m. Alaska time, a cub was killed by another bear downstream of Brooks Falls, about 100 yards downstream. So during the broadcast today, we're going to show what the camera saw. It's not gory or bloody, but if you think it might be too much to see, then maybe please come back in about 10 to 15 minutes after we sort of break down that situation, because we want to discuss what we know, what we don't know. We want to look later on in the program about other examples of bears interacting with bear families. We don't have any other examples of bears killing cubs to show you. So you won't see that after the beginning of the broadcast. But we do want to be here to help you understand maybe what happened and what we know, what we don't know, and answer your questions as well. We know that these situations provoke a lot of strong emotions and questions. So we'll do our best to help you understand the behaviors of the wild bears at Brooks River in the context of what happened with the cub yesterday. And we'll also talk to rangers about how they cope and how I cope when we see situations like this. Because believe it or not, we are humans as well and very emotional creatures in our own ways. So if you have questions for us as we head along during the broadcast today, drop those in the comments. A helpful moderator from explore.org, Courtney, is looking for those and she'll send those in our direction. To begin, though, I want to introduce the two bears that really kind of are our main characters in the show yesterday. Uh, this is bear number 26. So this is the main family that we'll talk about at the beginning of the broadcast. She was first ID'd in 2019 as an independent 2.5-year-old bear. She's likely the offspring of number 435 Holly, who's an older bear, an experienced mother who has several litters. And number 26, we think, was born from Holly's 2017 litter. And after separating from Holly a couple of years later, she spent a lot of time with her sibling, who is known by the number of 25. Uh, this is her first known litter. So this year she arrived with two cubs in July 2023. So we think this is her first known litter. And she's been seen infrequently over the last few years. But when mother bears come back with cubs, they become much more conspicuous on the landscape, much easier to identify because there's only so many mother bears with cubs. And Naomi, I know that you have also had the opportunity to watch, 26 over the past couple of weeks or so.
Yeah, this is a first time for her being a mother. Excuse me, and so she's learning on the job, and so she's a young, inexperienced bear, and you can see by this video. I mean, she's pretty skinny. Her hips are showing, which means she's not getting a lot of nutrition, but she's giving a lot of nutrition to those cubs. So she's she's her risk reward quotients are a little different, and we've been seeing her more and more at the falls. I mean, we've seen her in the lower river with her cubs, and she just hasn't had a lot of success down there. The water level is really high. I mean, the only fish that are being caught down there are really dead and dying salmon, and there aren't a lot of those now. So she's decided to come up to the falls, and she's juggling chasing after fish with keeping track of her cubs, and that's a tough job. And really, we only see the most experienced sows um, doing that. Now, the other main character in this is the boar. And Mike, you want to talk about that bear?
Yes, and just as a little asterisk here, um, I'm not 100% sure about this bear's identification, this adult male, but I'm like 95% sure it's bear number 88. He's not a bear that I know very well, so I just want to say, hey, if there's evidence that comes to light later that it's a different bear, then um, I'll let everybody know. But bear 88 was first identified in 2019 as perhaps a 3 or 4 year old bear. Not much is known about him. We don't know if he was raised along Brooks River or not, or if he's just sort of dispersed here from another area. He's known to have fished the riffles since at least 2021. And Felicia, have you had a chance to take a look at number 88 in person frequently this year?
I mean, I've definitely been to the falls. I've been to the river. I also don't really know this bear. He's a young male. He's, fishing over here in the riffles, which makes sense because, him being so young, he's not up there in that hierarchy to be fishing, those sought after positions in the jacuzzi or closer to the falls. Um, and yeah, I mean, I haven't really, if I have seen him, I probably just haven't really noticed all that much because yeah, he's just a young male that's fishing down there. We don't know too much about him. We've never seen this behavior from this bear before, but just a typical male bear.
Yeah, he's one of these young males that can, again, fly under the radar, and you may not pay very much attention to until something like what we saw yesterday happens. Uh, so what I'm going to do right now is we're going to take a look at that clip from last night on the Riffles cam. I'm going to break it down for everybody. But again, if you want to take a break for a few minutes and come back, that's okay. Or you can ask in the comments, hey, are they done talking about that situation? And then maybe you can come back if you want to. So last night around 10:15 p.m. So if we can cut to that footage. So this is July 27. So just yesterday, we have the mother bear, 26, sitting in the riffles area downstream of the falls. She has her two spring cubs. One has joined her already on that rock. The other one, you can see in the foreground, is struggling to get upstream towards her. The cub attempts to swim over to her. It just doesn't seem to have the strength to get upstream in the current. A lot of times mother bears won't come into the water to help their cubs. They're like, hey, cub, you got to make it on your own. Sometimes they will, a lot of times that they don't. And this is one of those instances where mom does not do that. It seems like 26 seems to assume that the cub will make it. She watches for fish. She's looking around. She's checking on the cub. Eventually, the cub will turn. Like it just is kind of like right now. It just seems like, hey, I can't make it. I'm going to try to go to a different spot, and it's carried downstream in the current. Now, what we can't see at this moment is that there's another bear downstream, and that is the bear that I think is number 88. The cub is carried downstream. The cam loses sight of it for just a moment as it sweeps by this log. We know for sure that it wasn't caught in the log. Some people were wondering whether that had anything to do with the situation. It doesn't. And then the cam zooms out to try to find the cub. But when it does so, we see a male bear who, I think is number 88, chasing something in the water on the right-hand side, splashing there. And that's the male bear attacking the cub. The cam pans downstream again, still looking for the cub. Our camera operators work extremely hard, and I don't think right at this moment in time that the camera operator noticed maybe what 88 was doing. So again, thanks to our camera operators for working so hard. And so we lose sight of the male for several seconds. When the cam pans upstream again, the male is in the same place, wrestling with something which is certainly not a salmon. The perspective is zoomed out, so we can't really see the details, but the object is large, it's dark, it's the right size and color to be the cub. And for my own purposes, I cropped the video of the male while this video was sort of pixelated, when I was able to blow it up to a larger image, it seemed pretty clear to me that the cub is what the male has in his jaws. Then he drops it in the water, and after dropping the cub, the male does not pursue it. So I think it's reasonable to assume that the cub died. 26 now, she doesn't react in alarm. She realizes the cub is gone, but it's interesting that she doesn't seem to have noticed that the male attacked it. And then 26 and her surviving cub move slowly up, down river to the riverbank, and then they eventually move up to the falls. The male bear quickly returns to fishing in the riffles. So that's what happened yesterday. To me, Felicia and Naomi, it's, again, it's a situation that is difficult to witness, difficult to watch. But what were the things? I guess maybe Naomi, I'll start with you. What were the things that stood out to you in this clip?
Well, it's bears being bears, and looking at the circumstances of these bears. I mean, 26 is doing her best to multitask, and she lost sight of her cub, and we've seen that a lot this season with new mothers. They're going, because there's not as much salmon in the river, they're harder to catch, they're going further away from their cubs, and they lose sight of them for a while, and she did. And clearly the boar went after that cub. It looked to me like kind of a predator prey response, and I don't, the whys and wherefores I don't know, but the hardest part for me to watch of this is 26 then obviously calling to her cub afterwards.
What about you, Felicia?
Yeah, I mean, I noticed a lot of the same things. Yeah, I mean, both bears are young bears. They're trying their best, to find fish, but 26 has the added challenge of having two spring cubs to look after. And finding that balance to get food for yourself while looking after your cubs is difficult, especially as a new mother. And, that water current is strong and it swept that cub away. And there just happened to be a male bear at the, end of the other side of the river. And it does look like, a bit of predator prey instinct. It's just so happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And, bears are opportunistic creatures. And when they're looking to satiate, themselves and, something comes by, then that's just a bear being a bear. And it's definitely heart-wrenching to see. But these are, what a bear's instincts are.
Yeah, those thoughts from the both of you echo mine as well. So wrong place, wrong time, especially for that cub. If that bear hadn't been there, if the male hadn't been there, then the cub probably would have eventually made it to shore. Mother would have found it. But it was one of those situations where it did run into the wrong bear at the wrong time and the wrong place. And I know one of the questions that a lot of people are wondering is, why male bears kill cubs. So we're going to try to go through some of the hypotheses associated with those. I know there's some questions sort of related to that right before we get to the hypotheses about why bears kill cubs. One question that I can answer definitively that came in from the audience recently is, did the bear actually consume the cub, or did he just kill it? From what I could see in that clip, he just killed it. Thought, maybe there was that he could have maybe started to feed on it, but it was just a really kind of relatively quick thing overall. The cub at this time of the year, and Rangers, if you have more information, let me know. I estimate that cubs, these first year cubs, are probably like 30 40 pounds at this time of the year. They're not small at all. Like, so when we see a bear consume a salmon, that salmon might be like 5 pounds on average. 4 to 7 pounds, I think, is average for sockeye salmon. For a spring cub, though, they are much, much bigger than that. They just look small compared to the other bears. So if that male were to actually be motivated to actually eat the cub in that moment, we would have seen him doing so, and that's not at all what we saw.
And also might have taken the cub out of the river to do that, right? I mean, that size of, you know, of a catch, if we can call it that. Um, so I don't think it. I mean, it didn't consume the cub.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, to me, if it wanted to eat, eat the cub, it would have done so probably in the water and then maybe, investigated and saw this is not a salmon or something that I'm that interested in, and that's why the bear let it go.
So that brings up the question that I had mentioned originally: is why do
Hmm.
bears kill cubs? And we're looking at, again, live footage of Brooks Falls in Katmai National Park. A lot of mature adult males at the waterfall right now. So none of the bears that I see in the frame that I know of have ever killed a cub in the past, and they've had opportunities. And we'll see some examples a little bit later on about how male bears react to cubs in different situations. One of the ideas, again, about why maybe a male bear will kill a cub is food. Um, there are instances where, yeah, a bear kills another bear and eats it. So bears have been known to do that. They've been known to do that with cubs. In this situation, though, from yesterday, that didn't seem to be the motivation. Perhaps another reason is a bear just trying to assert its dominance over that family. For instance, we've seen situations where it looks like, hey, the male bear is approaching that mother bear. She's in his path. He wants to assert his dominance, gets really close to a cub, and then all of a sudden the cub can't defend itself and ends up getting injured or killed. One of the most, I guess, shared explanations, or I guess hypotheses, for this behavior as well is something called sexually selected infanticide. And that's a male mating strategy in which males kill unrelated dependent offspring, such as like a cub, for example, to increase their own mating opportunities. Male bears don't play any role in raising cubs. So, there's not that element of family like you might have with a pack of wolves. So it's mother raising the cubs only. And uh, sexually selected infanticide, or at least infanticide, has been documented in a wide variety of mammals, but most often in social mammals that live in groups and can reproduce year round. So the idea is behind this hypothesis is, if a male bear kills a mother early, or kills a cub early in the season, mother will go back into estrus. He'll have that mating opportunity. But there's a lot of holes in each one of these hypotheses. So we can try to pick out some of those holes and flaws, and describe what we know and what we don't know. Um, Rangers, what do you think? I think yesterday seemed clear to me that this wasn't a case of sexually selected infanticide.
No, I mean, I think, I mean, I think part of this is space and competitive fishing space. I mean, what we do know about 88, if that is the bear, that he's very used to fishing in the riffles. So he sees something, he sees a cub coming up to him that's invading his space. And I think that's part of it. It seemed, as Felicia has mentioned as well, kind of a predator prey response. I think when we tell people not to run around bears, I think there's something in them that says, this is something I got to take care of. It's a danger to me, or it's a danger to my territory. I don't know. Those are kind of guesses from what I see.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, the why in this case is it's going to be speculation. We can't ask the bear. I definitely don't think it was like sexually selective or motivated in that way. It's late in the season, and um, I think this was just a wrong place, wrong time. This young bear got in the way or got too close to this male bear, and when that bear got swept away, predator prey instinct takes over, and yeah.
Yeah, those are great thoughts, and I concur with that as well. Certainly not a case of sexually selected infanticide, um, and when that cub was drifting downstream, it drifted right towards that male bear, and the male bear saw a bear coming towards it, and maybe made some movements. The male bear made some movements towards the cub. However, yeah, it didn't seem like it was food related in this instance. It was just maybe like a bear asserting its dominance over another one. And cubs are so small in comparison to large bears that they really can't defend themselves very well. And it's easy for a male bear to sort of subdue a cub in that sort of situation. But I know people were wondering, and a viewer question that came in recently was, could the boar, that is the male bear, had thought the cub was a beaver or otter since the current was so fast. We have seen situations on the river where bears have captured beavers. I remember going to the falls one day along the walkway in September, and a bear was feeding on something that was not a salmon. It was big. It was sort of brown. I didn't know what it was. I was worried that it was a cub. After the bear left, I was able to, along the walkway, get a little bit closer to what was left of the animal, and I looked through my binoculars, and it was a beaver skull, clearly a beaver skull, big giant incisors. So sometimes I think, yeah, bears will see small furry things in the water and think that they're food. In this situation, though, I think the bear probably had a very clear understanding that that the cub was not a beaver or an otter or something else, that it was another bear. Lots of bears, of course, interacting at Brooks Falls as we're looking at live footage now. Thanks for everyone's questions. We know that talking about the death of a cub is often kind of difficult and very emotional for a lot of people. We're going to do our best to try to answer as many of your questions as possible. Uh, so we have these ideas about why bears kill cubs. Somebody was also wondering about female bears. I know there's a question in the queue about that. Do female bears also kill cubs? I don't. Oh, there it is. Nope, that's not it. But anyway, somebody did ask that question. It's really rare for a female bear to kill a cub, but that has happened in the past as well. So most of the cases of infanticide in bears has been like a male attacking a cub, but it has also been documented in Katmai, for instance, of female bears attacking cubs. But there are many different ways that female bears protect their cubs. We can think about the fierceness of a mother bear, her defensiveness, her commitment to defending her cubs in a lot of different situations. So how are female bears protecting their cubs? We know that they can be very fierce, but I think there's other ways as well. We've witnessed maybe some of those events where they will defend their cubs. But Felicia, they're also, I think mother bears are also kind of working out different strategies over time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, different females have different ways that they're going to strategize, to keep their cubs safe. And one way is just keeping them away from high risk areas like the falls. Especially young mothers, they're learning and they're working out strategies to figure out how to balance watching their cubs while also gaining enough fish. They have to weigh that risk versus reward. Are they going to take their vulnerable spring cubs to these areas that are high risk, such as the falls, but they might have high reward of fish? And these events, as tragic as they may be, they're also shaping that female bear strategy for fishing. 26 is going to learn from this incident, and I don't know, maybe that will affect her strategy on where she decides to fish. And that also, depends on the availability of food and the salmon run, and there are just so many factors. But they're learning, and these are strategies that females are going to have to work out.
What do you think, Naomi?
Well, I think, Felicia's absolutely right. And I think there are also strategies that we see, not just in terms of weighing risk and reward, but some female bears with cubs will stand up to other bears when that's possible. And other bears, like we see with 128 grazer, they will stand up to other bears, but they can also establish a certain dominance so that they don't have to do that all the time. I mean, for instance, 151 Walker stays away from Grazer and her cubs, and even Grazer when she doesn't have cubs. So part of her strategy for defending her cubs is like the male bears do in the hierarchy, is establishing um, her dominance, and just, you better not fool with me. And then, a sow's experience, um, will, as Felicia mentioned, will also mold her strategy of protecting her cubs. And we see different strategies, like we see bear 402, who has had 8 litters and who has lost a cub to a boar, um, but she always brings her spring cubs to the river, and she might have them right next to the fish ladder, but she is experienced and she's very good at multitasking, fishing and protecting her cubs. I've seen her, you know, be in the river to fish, but always watching her cubs. And if any other bear seems like the danger, she will move back and she will protect those cubs. And then there's 854 Divot, who most of the time does not bring her cubs near the falls when they're spring cubs. And this year she was way down near the cove, the other end of the beach, not bringing her cub close to camp or the river for quite some time, but she did show up with that spring cub looking for fish, and that tells us something about the state of fishing these days. Because when they're yearlings, 854 will come to the river with those yearlings, and she is fierce in protecting them. So different strategies as mothers get more experienced. Mike, you have some other thoughts about this?
Well, there's a couple of other things I think that might be worth mentioning in addition to what the both of you have said. One of them relates to a question that did come in even before our broadcast began. Somebody asked, does it seem like more mama bears are taking their young cubs to the falls instead of downriver, et cetera, this year? I don't remember so many in the past. And it's hard to say. I think maybe the National Park Service's bear monitoring program. Maybe if later in the year, if we looked at the numbers collected in that, we might be able to say for sure. But yeah, I mean, we've been seeing some young moms bringing their cubs to the falls this year. Not just the experienced mothers like 402, but first time moms like 26 and like number 101. So one of the additional strategies that mother bears can utilize to protect their cubs is avoiding males in space and time, or avoiding areas with high concentrations of bears in space and time. So they'll learn where other bears are not, and they'll go there and be like, you know what, I'm going to try to make a living in this other way. Maybe I'll avoid fishing for salmon early in the season, for example, because I just feel like there are too many risks to my cubs. And I know, at least in some studies from Southeast Alaska with brown bears, there are mother bears who don't fish for salmon when they have cubs. They're just sort of like making a living up in the mountains on vegetation as best they can. From Katmai, we don't have the evidence to say that that's the case. It's possible, we just don't have it here. But we know that female bears will change their behavior depending on the age of their offspring. And then one final thing to mention on this topic is that female bears during the mating season are promiscuous. And when I say that, that's not a judgment on them. Male bears and female bears, they just have multiple mates. So that's what that term means during the mating season. And some people, some biologists hypothesize that this can confuse paternity among male bears because we don't know if male bears can sense genetic relatedness, but they may remember the female bears that they mated with. So since they are smart enough to sort of put two and two together, so to speak, I think, if a male bear is like, hey, I remember copulating with that bear last year. And she has cubs now. Maybe I'm going to leave them alone. Again, that's just a hypothesis. It's not really been experimentally demonstrated, but it does make sort of evolutionary sense. If you're a male bear, you wouldn't want to kill your own offspring if sort of like increasing your mating opportunities was a motivation for killing cubs. But yeah, female bears have many ways to protect their offspring. They're defensive, they're fierce, and they're also smart, and they learn over time to use different areas of the river. They weigh risk and reward. There's so much that goes into this. And given the individuality that bears demonstrate, and the choices that they make, the diversity of their behaviors, there probably isn't a single reason that explains why bears sometimes kill cubs. It always is, I think, may have an element of mystery to it and remain inexplicable. And complicating things further is that there have been documented cases, like I mentioned before, of female bears killing cubs, although that's quite rare. And we see many, many examples of male bears doing things around cubs that aren't necessarily that aggressive. A lot of times they ignore them, or they're not as aggressive as they could be. And I think we have a couple of examples about that to show. One from just a few days ago of number 747, had the opportunity to attack a yearling and just didn't do it at all. Rangers, I don't know if you actually saw, if you were at the falls and you saw this in person. Felicia and I talked about it during the play-by-play yesterday, but there's a yearling on top of Brooks Falls. It falls off, and it's going to be within feet of 747. Felicia, what did you see in this situation?
Yeah, you don't really see, the same thing that you saw today. You see this cub, it's floating right by 747. Like they could touch noses if they wanted to. But he kind of just lets the cub be, and cub, goes towards mom, and then mom makes him back up. Um, so very different
I,
situation.
yeah, and I mean, again, questions that we don't have answers for, but 402 is a pretty dominant female, and I don't know what connection 747 is making between 402 and that cub. I mean, again, it was a different behavior from uh, what we saw with the bear last night. He wasn't actually pursuing it, but then also there's that very dominant female who stood up to him, and I suspect he's had encounters with her before.
Yes, they've been using 402 and 747 have been using the river for a long time. They're both really big bears. 402 is a big female. 747 is a giant adult male. So if 747, again, wanted to attack the cub in this situation, he certainly could have. But mother, sort of stepped in, thankfully. So we didn't really, see if 747 would have done that. But yeah, I think this is an example of how bears, again, make decisions depending on the circumstances. 747 did show quite a bit of restraint in this situation. We have another clip that actually happened from just earlier today, a few hours or less before we went live, that's contrasting. It shows 747 on the left approaching number 26 and her surviving cub. The cub is a little late to realize what is happening. Mom runs away. She turns back and she defends her cub. In this situation, again, it's one of those questions like, why would 747 do that? And I wonder if he just saw an opportunity sort of to assert his dominance. And even though that was a very small bear, there's no threat to him. Maybe that was his motivation. I don't think it's over food. I mean, he's a well-fed bear. I don't think it was sexually selected infanticide in this instance. So dominance might be my best explanation, but it just goes to show too how big 747 is. And if he wanted to subdue 26 or her cub, if he could catch him, he could easily do so. There's no way those other bears could physically compete with him. What do you think, Naomi?
Oh, I think it is about dominance, and because 747 is having to defend his position in the hierarchy a little more this year, it seems a little more fluid. He may be more sensitive to bears being near the rock where he likes to eat, or being in, greater proximity to his fishing spot than he might normally tolerate.
And Felicia, do you have thoughts on
Yeah.
this?
Yeah, I mean, to circle back to your point, that you were saying, 747 is a well-fed bear. I mean, he's been high grading salmon this whole time too. It definitely, to me, doesn't look like he was interested in the cub, as prey in that sense. It definitely seems a little bit more like a dominance interaction to me. And, mom and cub are in his space. He's, is fighting for his position a little bit more, like Naomi was saying. So it's definitely a different situation. And then mom was able to step in because she was so much closer this time.
And that
And
was maybe
Mike,
one of the
you
big differences yesterday. Is sorry, Naomi, is that like in
no,
that situation
go
with
ahead,
seven
and
four
then I
seven.
wanted to add something.
Yeah, for sure. One of the big differences is with last night with the death of 26's cub. I don't think she knew where the cub was, so she wasn't able to step in and defend. But in that situation, it was kind of clear what was going on, so she was able to. So that was one reason why the outcomes are different. Sorry to step on you, Naomi.
No, no. But I wanted to add that there are two elements here. One is that sometimes when we talk about weighing risk and reward, sometimes maybe a new mom doesn't fully know the risk that she's facing, and you and I witnessed a very purposeful pursuit of a cub a few years ago. We were standing on the falls platform, and 856, who is known for killing cubs, was in the jacuzzi, and then um, another first time mom who was not that familiar with the Brooks River, Bear 900, came with her first spring cub and walked right underneath us under the platform, and 856 turned his head and immediately focused on that cub and chased the sow and the cub past the platform into the woods. Now, we didn't fully see what happened afterwards, whether he killed it, whether he separated that cub, but the difference in the focus is just so clear. And it was the combination of the sow making a mistake and 856 saying, I'm really interested in that cub. And why, I do not know. He doesn't talk to me about that stuff, but just a clear difference in behavior, I think, from what we see with 747.
Yeah, yeah. With the clips that we just showed with 747 and what we talked about earlier with 26 and 88, it was those situations again seem to be much more sort of circumstantial. While some of those instances of infanticide can be a male specifically targeting a cub for whatever reason. We've certainly seen that along the river, but I don't think that is what happened yesterday. And again, I think bears are conditioned just to chase small furry things. I think Naomi, you mentioned it earlier that uh, you tell people who are coming to Brooks River and to Katmai not to run from bears because it could trigger a chase response. So that can often lead to situations where cubs are injured or killed just because they're running away from this much larger bear, and bears just have that they're just conditioned to chase small furry things overall. And I think these are examples that show us that bears are mindful creatures, that they make decisions, so they're not acting solely on instinct. There's a lot going on in their minds. It doesn't necessarily, though, with all of this explanation, though, Naomi and Felicia, it doesn't make watching and seeing these things happen really any easier in a lot of ways. I'm wondering, one of the big questions that I wanted to ask the both of you is, and I have some thoughts on this, but I want to give you the chance to weigh in first. How do you cope with something like this when it happens, when a cub is killed? Um, what's your process like?
Well, I mean, it's not easy. Just because I'm here every day doesn't make my reaction any less emotional because I'm having a human reaction to a bear's action, right? So when I saw this video, it was very hard to watch. And when um, you and I might witness 856 go after 900's cub, I mean, my heart has never raced as fast as it did then here. I mean, even when I've been a few feet from a bear, my heart does not race that fast. But we have to remind ourselves that it's a bear's life and a bear's behavior, not human behavior. So I can't get angry at that bear. I can feel sad that happened, but sometimes people get angry, and I don't get angry. And I think the hardest part for me is to watch, sows looking for a dead cub later, or to watch 26's reaction afterwards. And I think that gradually we put, as a ranger here, working here and being around the bears all the time, we just put this in context of the challenges that a sow faces, that cubs face, and that boars face. And Felicia spoke about this very well the other day when we talked about moms and cubs in our chat. Is that spring cubs face a huge challenge to survive that first year, and I think we kind of look to applaud those cubs that have made it to their second year, because I'm nervous all year for the spring cubs. I mean, Felicia, how do you cope? How do you feel about this?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all of those points. It is really understandable to feel strong emotions at watching this. Spring cubs are really cute and you want to root for them. But also remember that spring cubs are at their most vulnerable point in their life. Mortality rate for a spring cub is the highest it's going to be for a bear at any point in its life. So if a spring cub can make it through that first year, they really made it through the hurdle. It's really difficult to watch even still with that information. You're going to want to feel those strong emotions because you want to root for them. But yeah, these are the challenges that you have to think of when you watch this. These are the challenges that spring cubs and mother bears go through. And it's you can have strong reactions, you can feel sad, that is understandable, but there aren't any morals in the bear world, as difficult as that is to stomach. Those decisions. We don't know the why. We just know that it's instinct. And even though we're having these strong emotions, just remember that these are bears, and these are bears being bears, and it's really not fair to assign morals to them. We just have to feel those emotions, feel them out, feel sad, mourn for the mother and the cub, but also realize they are going through those challenges, and just puts that in just perspective for us.
Yeah, great thoughts. I also think that it's normal and natural and human to feel empathy for bears in these situations. Uh, and I want people to feel empathy for the bears, right? Because if we're connecting to the bears and we're feeling empathy for them, then we're more likely to take action to make sure that their habitat is protected. Um, but when these situations happen, I do my best, and even when I see bear families, I try my best to channel my inner Spock if I can. I love bears, but I find that by compartmentalizing my emotions, I can look at the behaviors a bit more objectively. Sometimes that helps me to kind of get through these situations and see what is going on and view it, you know, in a way where my emotions are not necessarily clouding what I think. But I should also remind everybody that Spock is also half human, even he has emotions, and they can be quite strong if you like watching Star Trek. So I realize I'm also one person, and I feel emotions in these situations as well. And I also realize that most people's brains don't work like mine. Uh, but even said, learning about what we know and what we don't know is one of the best ways that I try to help myself cope with these situations. Um, and helping people explore and understand, the world of the bears, it helps me along with this process as well. If things are really, really tough and I'm feeling, pretty strong emotions, or I'm having some sort of daily existential crisis or whatever it is, a walk in the woods really helps me. If you don't have that opportunity, there's a lot of other great cameras on Explore.org that are just scenery, like the Redwood River camera is a wonderful one. We have so many great underwater cameras that just show coral reefs or fish in the ocean or aquariums. So those are great things to watch and relax to. And then also, before we use the rest of our time to answer audience questions, I do want to remind everybody that when these situations happen, please be kind and understanding with the fellow bear camp community, because people are going to react in a lot of different ways. Some people are going to have much, much more strong reactions to these situations than me, and I understand that's how that's going to happen. And it's not my place to tell them, hey, you shouldn't react as emotion, or you should be emotionally detached like Spock. I think that would be inappropriate. It works for me, doesn't work for everybody else. And I think that's why we're here right now. We're going to try to just, hopefully this information and talking through this helps everyone better understand what's going on and cope with those situations. Rangers, we do have about 10 minutes left, I guess, in our broadcast here. And there's several questions that we have not answered yet. I think this might be a good time to get through those if you are willing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
I think the more we talk about everyone's concerns, the better we're going to get through this.
And one of the questions that came in right before the chat, or even right or right when we began, was about a topic that a lot of people have been wondering this year: salmon runs, and how we've seen fewer fish this year compared to years past. So this person wonders: are the mother bears being forced to take risks they normally wouldn't due to the current lack of salmon runs? And I should say that there's definitely the salmon are here. And this is the salmon run. We're seeing fewer salmon this year than in years past. And that's because the runs in the last several years have been just huge, much larger than average. So this year we're seeing something maybe closer to historic averages. But yeah, what about those mother bears? Are we seeing maybe more mothers taking their cubs to the falls, for instance, because they're having less fishing success downstream because maybe there are fewer fish?
Well, I think there are two things here. One is, I will say yes. And I'll, take Divot, 854 Divot as an example. We don't normally see her bring her spring cubs to the falls, and she has this year. But we also have a lot more spring cubs. There are 16 spring cubs, or maybe 15 now. There were 16 yesterday, sorry. But that's a lot of spring cubs. So I think it's a combination of having so many cubs, and then yes, there are more mothers coming to the falls with their cubs. Felicia, what do you think?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. There are a lot of spring cubs running around, which is due to the abundant, salmon run that we had last year. And I think that's a part of it. We have a lot of mothers with cubs. And then also, a lot of people are thinking this is a smaller year, or because we're used to seeing just record breaking years. But this is still a good year. It's just last year was a year, and the salmon are here. It seems like they're really staging at this point in the mouth, and moving a little bit up towards there. They haven't really started jumping the falls. But I remember mentioning this with Mike, at one point, I think when we were doing our play by play earlier. When visitors see there's a bunch of bears at the falls, it's usually when there aren't a lot of fish jumping. And then when there are a lot of fish jumping, they don't see as many bears because these bears can spread out along the river. But versus, when we're having many days where there aren't a bunch of um, fish jumping, all the bears are congregating into these areas. So you're going to have a lot of bears congregating in you know, um, these concentrated fishing areas, and we have a lot more mothers with cubs running around, so they also need to compete for space in these highly concentrated areas. So I think there's just a bunch of different factors in play here.
Another question that came in pretty early in our conversation is about the male bear, who we tentatively have identified as number 88. Again, we're not sure about that. If we change our minds, we'll let everybody know. But somebody was wondering, will that bear from last night develop an interest in hunting cubs now? I don't think so. It didn't. To me, it didn't really look like the bear was rewarded with anything in that situation. Not certainly not like food, um, for instance, because we know that it did not eat the cub. Um, so I don't think so. But yeah, Felicia, do you have an idea on that?
Yeah, I don't think so. The why in this situation still is unclear. We're probably never going to know, why boars go after cubs in that way. But I don't think there's like a definite pattern or anything that we can point to. I think this was just a wrong place, wrong time, one-off incident. But yeah, I don't think there's enough evidence to suggest that that could become a pattern later on.
What do you think, Naomi?
Yeah, I agree. This wasn't a hunting situation. This seemed, again, wrong place, wrong time, circumstantial. I mean, certainly be interesting to watch. What I'd like to watch is that bear and how that bear defends his space in general. I don't think he's going to be hunting cubs. There really was nothing in it for him to do that, except what looked like defending his fishing spot.
A question now about the behavior of Bear 26. So this person writes in, I'm wondering why a sow like 26, whose mother, 435 Holly, raised her to earn her living on the lower river mostly, would continue over the past few weeks to bring her spring cubs to the falls looking for salmon. So maybe we can talk about, kind of reiterate once again how different female bears mothers make their living, why a mother bear would be motivated to take her cubs to the falls. We know Holly is an experienced mom, several litters, and she really doesn't take first year cubs to the falls. She'll take older cubs to the falls, but not necessarily first year cubs. But mother bears, or their offspring, I should say, when they have cubs of their own, they're not mimics of the moms before. There's a lot of cultural learning that goes on with bears, but there's also a lot of individual choices that bears make. So I think,
Yeah,
perhaps, yeah, the hunger that she felt overall, number 26, that was probably the main motivation for her to come to the falls, and the fact that she is a first-time mom. She's still trying to figure things out and how to make this work for her.
yeah. But I mean, also Holly, when she's alone, will come to the falls occasionally, but she really is a lower river fisher. Um, and I don't think 26 has had a lot of success where mom fished a lot, and I mean, I have seen 26 a lot in the fall fishing, but again, she's finding her way. She doesn't hasn't had another litter. She's young. Everything's new for her.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, I mean, oh, sorry.
no, go ahead, Felicia.
Oh yeah, I mean just to like reiterate on your point, they're not necessarily mimics of their mom. She's just figuring things out. Even though, that's how she was raised. She's got to figure out, and weigh that risk versus reward. So, if she's finding success fishing at the falls, or she might find success, it's something for her to try out.
We'll try to answer a couple more questions here before we conclude our broadcast today. Thanks for joining us if you've been along for the whole entire ride. Um, one of the questions is that we can answer next, real quick, is just about the overall risks to cubs. We've been talking a lot about how there's a chance that a bear could attack and kill a cub. And that's really what precipitated our conversation today, because that happened yesterday um, on the cams. But this person was wondering, is there a chance the cub would have drowned had it not been stopped by the male bear? Cubs can drown for sure. In this situation, Rangers, and Naomi, maybe I'll let you jump in first. I don't think the cub was at risk of drowning in this situation, although cubs can certainly drown.
No, I agree. I mean, being taken downstream in the riffles where there are places to stop, and eventually, I mean, there's so many rocks um, there that eventually, or shoreline that the cub might have encountered. I mean, I think a more dangerous place and a tougher place is in the lake and at the mouth of the river, where a cub may be out there in deep water and have to swim a distance to keep up with mom.
Any thoughts, Felicia?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. Cubs can drown, but I don't think that cub was in any danger of that if it hadn't been stopped. Probably would have found a rock or a log to get up on, or even reach the other side. But you just don't know.
Yeah, I think it was really unfortunate. Well, in a lot of ways, but when we think about what happened with that cub yesterday, it was struggling to swim upstream to join its mother and its sibling on that rock. I wonder, was that first cub stronger, the surviving cub stronger in that moment than the other? Uh, that one made it to the rock with mom, the other couldn't. What if it was just a little weaker in that moment? Maybe it didn't eat as much earlier in the day. It was hungry. It was just that much weaker, um, and that led to it dying downstream when it basically floated that other bear. So yeah, it's like these. Sometimes I think about these really small things that happen in the lives of animals or even in people as well. Sometimes seemingly inconsequential circumstances or events have significant influence on the future of a bear's ultimate fate. You wonder, or I wonder at least, if that cub had a stomach full of milk, or digested milk recently, would it have had the strength to meet mom? I don't know. Again, I'm just speculating, but there's so many different things that can happen in those situations. But certainly it was not able uh, to keep up with mom, or at least join mom on the rock, because the current was too strong. There's
And
many
Mike,
audience questions.
I
Oh,
have,
sorry. Go ahead, Naomi.
yeah, no, I have one other thought in that context, and it's kind of a partial coping mechanism, but also an observation, which is 2 days ago we celebrated the return of Otis, who is our oldest boar, right? And we celebrate his return as a survivor, and I think that's partially a coping mechanism for me, because we can mourn the loss of that cub, but let's remember how other bears really can survive and amaze us. I mean, the fact that Otis returned in his probably 28th year um, is caused celebration around the world, and we have to take the Cubs' loss as very sad, but in context. of celebrating other bears' survival.
Very well said. And
Mhm.
I apologize to our audience for not being able to answer all of your questions. We're just about out of time. But I do have one more question for the Rangers. Sometimes in these situations, people want to help. They want to help the bears. We can't help every individual bear, but we can do a lot to help bears overall. So, um, Felicia, I guess I'll throw it to you first, and Naomi, you can chime in with your thoughts. But I'm wondering, how can people help bears?
I mean, there are a lot of things that people can do to help bears. You know, Bear Cam fans are our citizen science. They're helping out with the Bear ID project, they're contributing to the Bear Wiki. Those actions, help us out. And then if you want any kind of direct action too, there's also the Katmai Conservancy, and that, those donations or anything like that, any support you want to give the conservancy, go directly to the park through our, park partner.
What do you think, Naomi?
Well, I think one really major thing that we all can do is to figure out how we as individuals can help mitigate the effects of climate change, because that is a threat to these bears. I mean, they're in a particularly healthy ecosystem, and we celebrate them. And during Fat Bear Week at the end of the season, and we celebrate this ecosystem. But that can change. And just before we started this broadcast, we shared um, ocean temperatures in the North Pacific, and it's very warm. And it may be nice in 60s here, but there are a lot of salmon out there in that North Pacific. They may be having a tough time. So I think that anything we can do to mitigate the effects of climate change in our own lives or in the wider world is something that will help these bears.
Yes, so go the salmon, so go the bears in Katmai National Park, and so much else. So, if we can protect salmon runs and we can make sure that the oceans are healthy and climate change doesn't negatively impact the oceans, then we can do a lot of good for these bears overall. And then one final thought that I'd like to add about helping bears is I want to I would like people to consider channeling their love of bears and the emotions that they feel for them and the empathy they feel for them towards wildlife in your own communities. Whether that's planting pollinator friendly plants, or maybe being more tolerant of animals near and around your home if you can, and especially if you live in bear country, removing attractants from your yard, things that may cause bears to come into conflict with people. There's a lot of different things that we can do to help wild animals all over the world and biodiversity. So I would like people to, again, to try to channel your energy and emotions towards some of those actions as well. Rangers, it's been great to talk with you today. Thanks for taking the time to share your thoughts about what we saw yesterday on the cams with that cub losing its life. But we have a lot of other, I think, more joyful events to look forward to on the bear cams this summer. So thanks for being here.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
My co-hosts for this broadcast today were Katmai National Park Rangers, Felicia Jimenez, and Naomi Boak. My name is Mike Fitz with explore.org. We'll talk to you again next week with several other Bear Cam live events. And until we do so, enjoy the Bears.